60 years after the start of the civil rights movement, why are we still talking about these issues of diversity and equity and inclusion?
I think it's cultural development in the country. If you look at the most recent census data, it tells us that, for example, the Caucasian group as a racial set is shrinking as a component of our overall population in the United States. And in some states, it's no longer the predominant racial group. California is a great example. And so as our population on the whole becomes more diverse, I think workforces and businesses, we need to try harder to focus on diversity to make them a true reflection of what our overall population is like. But that doesn't happen organically. If you want to do it as a business, you need to be deliberate about it. You need to be passionate about it. And that's the only way you're going to succeed to achieve diversity in your workplace.
I've read somewhere where Caucasians are going to be the minority in Arizona here pretty soon. So how does that make it more important for businesses to pay attention to this now?
Well, I think it's because you can't think that you're going to achieve diversity just naturally. I think some business leaders will step back and look at that data that you're describing and think, well, you know what, we don't really need to devote a lot of energy or effort to a diversity program because theoretically, our workforce eventually should mirror our population. In your state, for example, California, Hispanic is the predominant racial group now, and that probably will become true in Arizona soon as well. And so I think the potential for complacency is a real problem, because if you think that you don't need to put effort into it because it's going to happen organically, you won't succeed or sustain it.
That's a great answer. I had never really thought about it like that. So let's talk a little bit about the mistakes that businesses are making. What are some of the major mistakes or missteps that business leaders are making when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace?
Well, it kind of keys to what I was just saying. I think the biggest mistake is complacency, thinking that you can achieve diversity without being systematic and passionate about it, just because our population is becoming more diverse. And then the second biggest mistake, which follows from complacency, is not devoting resources to a diversity program. You've got to create a program, you have to staff it the right way, and you have to give it the freedom to do what it needs to do so that you can achieve diversity in your workplace. At our firm, we've had a diversity and inclusion committee for years. Julia chairs it, and they meet regularly, they're visible. And I think that is the first step in the process of eventually achieving buy-in from your larger workforce, seeing that as a business you're going to devote the resources to it, and then subsequently seeing that it'll succeed and that it'll sustain itself. And then you have more volunteerism, more excitement about it, but it's all a process.
Julie, what have you seen as the biggest impact of that committee that you chair?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's showing the employees that this is something that management and leadership at the firm is really dedicated to. Obviously, the programs themselves are the most important, but a lot of times those types of programs, if we're doing things in the community, if we're supporting our fellow bar associations, that sort of thing, our actual employees may not see that. And so I think it's really important, especially as the inclusion part of diversity, equity, inclusion, that people realize this is something that we're dedicated to, and that in turn makes them feel more comfortable at the firm, and they're more likely to stay.
Okay, COVID has impacted all aspects of business. How has it impacted the initiatives that some companies have taken in terms of diversity and inclusion?
Well, it's been a big setback, for sure. Just like John was saying, you have to devote resources to something like this, and you have to be present and in front of your employees. We haven't been present and in front of our employees, not in the same way, anyway, that we were before. And at least temporarily, a lot of businesses, not knowing what this was going to do, the pandemic, they had to stop those resources for anything that wasn't purely business related. So it was a setback. But at the same time, I think there's a real opportunity here, because a lot of the groups, a lot of diverse groups, whether it's women, people of color, those individuals typically need more flexibility in order to remain in the workplace or in order for diversity to begin occurring. And now that people have exercise more diverse workplace practices like remote work or part-time schedules, that sort of thing, those things seem more possible to management. They realize we can get our job done and continue to make money and be a thriving business and still have people working remotely from home, or sometimes let people work part-time. So it's been a setback, but I think in the future, this could actually be a positive for diversity in the workplace.
Initiatives that companies can take in order to improve their diversity and equity performance in the workplace. Are there some best practices that business leaders should be incorporating into their workplace in order to make diversity, equity, inclusion part of that company's culture?
Fundamentally, I don't think best practices in relation to diversity are really that much different than best practices in connection with a different program that you might want to champion at your business. You need to create a platform for it. You need to create a program or a committee or a group. You need to provide resources to it. It needs to be visible. And you need to sort of, I think, create metrics and accountability for what it's supposed to do and whether that group or committee or program achieves those goals. And then as those achievements are made and the rest of your workforce sees that, like I said before, I think it just becomes exciting for the rest of the people in the organization who may not be formally a part of that committee or program, but they see this happening, they see it sustaining, and then they want to become involved because they see it being successful. And so from a best practices standpoint, I think it's really just treating it like a systematic goal or objective, like you would something else in business. But obviously, it's a different animal, but I think you sort of approach it the same way. I mean, that's the way we approached it at our firm.
This is a tough question that I'm sure a lot of business leaders struggle with, but should you hire a lesser qualified candidate just to improve your diversity in the workforce?
Well, I think the short answer is no. However, you really need to look at, is this person qualified or not? So first, when you hear that question, and I hear it a lot, I hear it from employers, I do labor and employment law, and first you have to look at, is your current recruiting and hiring practice really just? Is it equitable? Because we look at that like, is this person as well qualified? Well, did they go to the same schools that the individuals you already have went to? Do they get along socially with the same people that you already have in the firm? Is that really equitable? Is that even really a requirement of the position? So you need to look at your actual job descriptions. What is this person really going to be doing? And are you really already with your current practices looking for that? Or do you have a sort of skewed metric that you're using? And then in addition to looking at your current practice and recognizing that perhaps it's not as just as it should be, you need to look at these candidates and fully appreciate what being part of certain diverse groups brings to the table or can bring to the table for your business. So having a female perspective, having people of color to bring different ideas. Businesses are all about coming up with creative solutions. That's what they do. And the more ideas and viewpoints you have in the room, the better a decision you're going to make. So make sure that you are fully giving credit to that individual for their qualifications and for what they bring to the table.
How can businesses take a step back and know whether or not they are doing the right things? I mean, it's hard to be self-analytical at times. So what advice would you give for that?
That's an excellent question. And first, I think we need to be upfront and honest about the fact that this is an uncomfortable process. Okay, people don't like to admit that maybe what they're doing right now isn't completely equitable. No one wants to feel that way. But because of that, we also need to recognize that we're all inherently biased in how we look at ourselves. And so you need to outsource this to a third party. I'd say training, number one, implicit bias training. It's become sort of popularized, but that's because it's so important. It shows you these sort of underlying systemic issues that are impacting the way you make decisions. And once you recognize them, of course you don't want to be inequitable, but someone needs to point those out. And then second, there are some really great employee engagement surveys out there that can ask questions in a way that will automatically elicit honest answers. And then those individuals that provide those surveys can analyze those and help you understand, this is what I'm seeing here. This is where you seem to be having trouble. These are individuals that are feeling uncomfortable in your workplace. So I really think that's something you need to trust to a third party and to the professionals.
How do companies get buy-in? How can business leaders get management and labor to buy into DEI initiatives?
I think that if you approach the goal and the objective the right way, meaning creating a program, staffing it correctly, giving it resources, holding it accountable, that is the recipe for it succeeding. And to me, buy-in is sort of just like a function of leadership by example. The first step in getting it is by doing all those things. As a leader or a group of leaders at a business, you show everybody else in your organization that you're committed to this. It's a priority, and they see that. But the second step in the buy-in process is once that program succeeds, once the efforts that it succeeds in become sustainable, people stay, you're recruiting more diverse people and they're coming into your business. Once the rest of the workforce sees that, as I said before, then I think it becomes exciting for everyone in the business. And then more people want to participate in it. And that is really the process of buy-in, leading by example and then succeeding so that the rest of your workforce sees what you've done and then wants to become a part of it. Then everybody buys into it. But if you don't devote the resources to it, you don't make a priority of it, you think because our population generally is becoming more diverse, you don't need to worry about it, there will never be any visibility to your desire for diversity to your workforce, and there won't be any success in it either. And you'll never achieve buy-in because you don't have the elements of leadership by example and success in the effort.
How important is it to bring in an outside set of eyes to kind of help you through that, creating initiatives?
I think that's crucial because, like I said, people don't want to believe that they have inequitable ideas. And I think a lot of people look at that as, oh, I must be terribly biased, or I'm a bad person if I have these ideas that are not completely objective. And someone that is a third party can sort of take that stigma out of it and say, hey, look, we all have inequitable ideas or implicit bias. And that third party can work with you on how to recognize those and deal with those in a way that makes it more palatable, a little bit more comfortable.
A lot of companies hire diverse candidates and then see them leave fairly quickly. What can they do to retain those employees so they can maintain that diverse workforce?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the types of things John was talking about. If an employer thinks that diversity ends with the hiring process, they're going to be in trouble. In fact, in my opinion, it is worse to bring in a diverse candidate and then have a hostile work environment or just an unpleasant work environment, which they subsequently leave from, than it is to not have hired that individual in the first place. If you are going to really diversify your workplace, you need to take a look again from an objective perspective. What is the job that I need to have done? How do I best service my clients? And how can I help each and every employee do that? And it's not about having rigid rules or rigid schedules that everyone has to abide by equally. It's about sort of meeting everyone where they are and helping them achieve the best for their clients. So I also think, again, third parties, employee engagement surveys. If you don't ask, if you yourself have never experienced difficulty with transportation or with internet connection, you may not realize that there are individuals in your workplace that do have that issue, something you can easily solve. So talk to your employees, and if you feel like they're not comfortable responding, have a third party do it. Do it anonymously, but find out what those issues are and address them head on instead of pretending that they're not there.